I'm Claire, and my 42nd birthday party fell apart in a single second. Let me paint you the picture. Saturday night, 8:47 p.m., our brownstone in Park Slope. Exposed brick walls lined with family photos, most of them lies. Edison bulbs casting that warm, Instagram-perfect glow over 60 people I thought I knew. Jazz playing softly in the background. The smell of expensive catering. Daniel always insisted on expensive mixing with too many competing perfumes. I was standing in the center of our living room, champagne flute raised, trying to thank everyone for coming. My voice was steady, practiced. I'd been practicing a lot of things lately. I just want to say how grateful I am. That's when Daniel's mother leaned in. Real close. Her Chanel No. 5 hit me before her words did. I saw her lips move against Daniel's ear. Saw something shift behind his eyes, like a switch flipping. Like watching a man disappear and something else take his place. The room was still laughing at some joke someone had made, still oblivious. Daniel turned to me. His face had gone completely blank. That's what scared me most. Not anger, but nothing. Just empty. "Don't you dare embarrass me tonight, Claire," he said, loud enough that the conversation started dying in waves, spreading outward from us like ripples. Then his hand moved. The slap echoed like a gunshot in our suddenly silent apartment. I felt it before I heard it, the sharp crack against my cheekbone, the way my head snapped to the side, the metallic taste of blood where my tooth cut the inside of my cheek. The champagne flute slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood in a spray of glass and veuve clicquot. For a moment, I was suspended in that strange, elastic second after violence, where time stretches out and you can see everything with terrible clarity. Daniel's mother's satisfied smirk quickly hidden. His business partner looking at his shoes. My best friend Sarah's hand covering her mouth. 60 people, and not one moving to help me. I went down hard. My hip hit first, then my shoulder. The burning spread across my face like wildfire. I could hear my own breathing. Could feel the cold floor against my palms. Could taste the copper bloom of blood. Everyone just stood there, frozen. Like they were watching a play and weren't sure if they were supposed to clap yet. Daniel stood over me, his chest heaving, his hand still raised slightly like he couldn't quite believe what he'd just done, or maybe like he was considering doing it again. "Get up," he hissed. "You're making a scene." I was making a scene. That's when something inside me just clicked. I'd spent 18 months planning for this. 18 months documenting everything. 18 months being the perfect wife while I built my case, brick by brick, lie by lie, offshore account by offshore account. 18 months waiting for Daniel to do exactly what he'd been programmed to do. So I started laughing. Not loud, not hysterical. Just a low, genuine laugh that started in my chest and bubbled up through my bloodied lips. I pushed myself up onto my elbows, tasted blood, and smiled. A real smile. The first honest expression I'd worn in months. "Perfect timing, Daniel," I said quietly. But in that dead silent room my voice carried. "You couldn't have scripted it better." That's when I saw it happen. The color drained from Daniel's face. His eyes went wide. His hand, the one that had hit me, started trembling. What he started, but his voice cracked. I kept smiling as I got to my feet. My crimson dress I'd chosen red deliberately, just in case, was torn at the knee. Blood was trickling from my split lip. I could feel my cheek already swelling. And all around us, phones were up, recording. Daniel's friends, his colleagues, his family, all capturing this moment in perfect 4K clarity. "You should all check your phones," I said conversationally, dabbing at my lip with the back of my hand. "What you've just witnessed and recorded is about to get very interesting." The first phone chimed, then another. Then a wave of notification sounds rippled through the room like dominoes falling. Daniel's face went from white to green. "Claire, what did you—" 18 months, Daniel," I said softly, meeting his eyes. "That's how long I've known. About the offshore accounts. About the shell companies. About what your mother's been doing to you since you were a kid." I paused. About everything. His mother made a small sound, something between a gasp and a growl. I turned to address the room. All these people who'd watched me get hit and done nothing. My lawyer forwarded a very comprehensive file to the FBI about 6 minutes ago. Right around the time I walked into this room, actually. I smiled wider, feeling my lips split further. It was set to send automatically if I didn't stop it, and I'll be honest, after that performance, I really didn't want to stop it. Daniel was staring at his mother now, something dawning in his eyes, something that looked almost like clarity breaking through years of fog. "You made me," he whispered. "You actually made me." "Oh, honey," I said, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "She's been making you do things your whole life. This was just the first time it was caught on camera." The room had erupted into chaos now, people checking phones, shocked gasps, the sound of someone on a frantic phone call in the corner. But I only had eyes for Daniel. For the moment his programming finally, completely shattered. For the moment he realized his mother had just destroyed them both. And for the moment he understood that I'd been counting on it. "Happy birthday to me," I said softly. Then the doorbell rang. Federal agents, right on time. The smell of coffee still does it to me. Dark roast, just shy of burnt the way Daniel used to like it. 5:30 every morning for 12 years I'd wake up before the alarm and start the pot. I'd stand there in our kitchen in my bathrobe, watching the sky turn from black to navy to that particular shade of gray that only exists over Brooklyn rooftops, and I'd feel useful, needed. God, I was so young when we met, 30 years old and convinced I'd figured out what love meant. Daniel was brilliant back then, or at least I thought he was. He had this tech startup, some app that was supposed to revolutionize something or other. I never fully understood it, but I understood his passion. The way his eyes lit up when he talked about changing the world. The way he worked 16-hour days and still made time to bring me flowers on Fridays. When the startup collapsed, it took everything with it. I remember the night he told me. We were sitting on the fire escape of our old apartment in Williamsburg, the tiny one-bedroom we could barely afford even then. He couldn't look at me. Just stared out at the lights of Manhattan and said, "I lost it all, Claire. Every investor. Every cent. $340,000 in debt." I didn't hesitate. "We'll figure it out," I said. And I meant it. I took a second job teaching SAT prep on weekends. Picked up freelance editing work at night after my day job at the publishing house. I'd work until 2, 3 in the morning sometimes, my eyes burning from the computer screen, while Daniel slept in the next room, his body curled tight with shame. It took 4 years to pay it all off. 4 years of instant ramen and subway commutes and canceled plans with friends because we couldn't afford to go out. 4 years of saying next year when I looked at the promotions I kept turning down because I needed the flexible hours, needed the time to keep us afloat. But I never once regretted it. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You carry them through the dark parts. You hold on until the light comes back. Then his mother got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. Victoria had always been difficult with me, cold in that specific way wealthy women can be when their sons marry below their station. But when she got sick, when the treatments made her weak and angry and afraid, Daniel couldn't handle it. He'd visit her at the hospital and come home shaking, unable to speak. So I stepped in. 5 years. I drove to her Upper East Side apartment every Tuesday and Thursday after work. I managed her medications, coordinated with her doctors, held her hair back when the chemo made her vomit. I listened to her stories about Daniel's childhood, about her late husband, about the family legacy I'd never quite be good enough to join. Some nights, she'd look at me with those sharp eyes still sharp, even through the morphine, and say, "You're stronger than I thought you were, Claire." I took it as a compliment. The house in Park Slope? That was mine too. My signing bonus when I finally made senior editor, plus the inheritance from my grandmother, plus 5 years of savings scraped together from every overtime hour and freelance check. Daniel's name went on the deed because that's what married people do. We're a team, I kept telling myself. What's mine is ours. I even gave up the promotion to executive editor, my dream job, the one I'd worked toward for a decade because Daniel was going through a rough patch. That's what he called it. Depression, anxiety, stress from family obligations. He needed me home more, needed me available, needed me to be his rock. If I love him enough, I whispered to myself at night, lying next to him in the dark, he'll get better. He'll see how much I care. He'll change. If you've ever given everything to someone who later turned away, you'll understand this part. You'll know that quiet, stubborn hope that keeps you going even when every sign says stop. That voice that says just a little more, just a little longer, just a little more love, and it'll all work out. Thank you to everyone who helps keep these stories alive. Every word you share, every act of kindness helps protect those who still believe in family, who still believe that devotion matters. I believed it right up until the night I came home early from a work trip and heard Daniel on the phone in his study, door closed, voice low. "She'll never know," he was saying. "Claire trusts me completely, she always has." I stood in the hallway, my suitcase still in my hand, and felt something cold settle into my chest. That was 18 months ago. That was the night I stopped being the good wife and started becoming something else entirely. I didn't mean to find it. That's what I kept telling myself later, as if stumbling onto the truth by accident somehow made it hurt less. As if the universe owed me points for not actively searching for proof that my marriage was a lie. It was a Tuesday, 3 weeks before my birthday party. I'd come home early from work, migraines splitting my skull in half, and went straight for the medicine cabinet in our bathroom. That's when I saw Daniel's iPad on the counter, screen still glowing. He'd been in a hurry that morning, left it unlocked. I almost didn't look. I swear to God, I almost just closed it and walked away. Because once you see something, you can't unsee it. Once you know, you can never go back to not knowing. But my hand moved anyway. The email was open. A thread between Daniel and his mother, dated from the night before. The subject line read, "C's birthday, final steps." My heart started hammering before I even read the first line. "Daniel, the lawyer confirmed we can finalize the asset transfer at the party. Make sure Claire signs the amendment to the deed. Tell her it's a refinancing document. Once it's notarized, the brownstone reverts entirely to your name. After that, she becomes legally irrelevant to the family trust." I had to read it 3 times before the words made sense. The brownstone, my house, the one I'd bought with my inheritance, my savings, my grandmother's legacy, they were taking it. My hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped the iPad. I scrolled down, kept reading. Each line another knife between my ribs. "The prenup you signed last month will hold. Her lawyer never noticed the offshore clause. Everything she thinks is joint property has already been transferred. The accountant did beautiful work. Prenup. What prenup? We'd been married for 12 years. Then I remembered. 2 months ago. Daniel had come home with papers, said something about updating our estate planning now that his mother was better. I'd been exhausted from a double shift of work and hadn't read it carefully. Just signed where he pointed, trusting him the way I'd always trusted him. God, I was so stupid. The next email was from Victoria to Daniel, sent at 11:47 p.m. "Make sure she's compliant at the party. If she causes a scene, we'll need to accelerate the timeline. Remind her that her job, her reputation, her place in this family, all of it depends on her cooperation. P.S. Jessica sends her love. She's excited about the apartment you two picked out in Tribeca. Jessica." His mother's assistant. 26 years old, blonde, always lingering too long when she dropped off Victoria's paperwork at our house. The apartment in Tribeca. I stood there in my bathroom, under the fluorescent lights that suddenly felt too bright, too harsh, and felt my entire world collapse inward like a dying star. 12 years. 4 years paying off his debts. 5 years caring for his dying mother. My house. My savings. My life. And he was planning to erase me like I'd never existed. I scrolled further, my vision blurring. Found a text thread between Daniel and Jessica from that morning. "Daniel, can't wait to finally be free. Just a few more weeks. Jessica, your mom says the party is the perfect opportunity. Make sure Claire signs everything. After that, she's irrelevant. Daniel, she'll sign. She always does what I ask. It's kind of pathetic, actually. Jessica, poor thing has no idea. See you tonight? Your place? Daniel, she's working late. We have time." The iPad slipped from my hands. Clattered into the sink. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The bathroom walls seemed to be closing in, the air too thick, too heavy. Pathetic. That's what I was to him. Pathetic. The devoted wife who worked herself to the bone, who sacrificed everything, who believed that love and loyalty meant something. I looked up at myself in the mirror, saw my face pale, shocked, still so goddamn trusting even now, and barely recognized the woman staring back. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal made you question your own worth, you're not alone. You're not crazy for believing in goodness. You're not weak for having faith. Thank you to everyone who helps me tell these stories. Your support keeps this space alive for those who still believe that truth, somehow, will always find its way. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. My migraine had disappeared, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. The slap at my birthday party that wasn't going to be the beginning of their plan. It was going to be the end of mine. I picked up the iPad with steady hands, Opened a new browser window. Searched for 3 things: forensic accountant, divorce attorney specializing in fraud, and how to document financial abuse. Then I started taking screenshots. Every single one. The room didn't explode the way you'd expect. No one screamed. No one rushed to help me up off that floor. The jazz kept playing some smooth, meaningless melody that felt obscene against what had just happened. Someone's champagne glass clinked against a table, a nervous cough from the corner, and then Victoria moved. She glided across the room with that practiced grace of hers, the one she'd perfected at 1,000 charity galas. Her hand went to her chest in a gesture of concern so rehearsed, it might as well have been choreographed. "Oh, Claire," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" She reached down as if to help me, and I saw it in her eyes, the calculation, the performance. This was her moment to control the narrative before it could slip away from her. I pushed myself up without taking her hand. "Claire has been unwell lately," Victoria announced to the room, turning to address our guests like she was giving a press conference. "We've all been so worried about her. The stress of her job, the pressure she puts on herself." She sighed, a perfect blend of concern and disappointment. "Tonight was supposed to be a celebration, but I'm afraid she's been difficult." Difficult. The word hung in the air like poison. I looked around the room, searching for one face, just one that might show doubt, that might question what they'd just seen. Sarah, my best friend since college, was staring at her shoes. Daniel's business partner had already turned away, suddenly fascinated by his phone. The couple from next door, the ones I'd had over for dinner a dozen times, were whispering to each other, their eyes sliding away from mine. Not one person stepped forward. "Daniel has been under such strain," Victoria continued, her hand now on her son's arm. "Protective. As if he were the victim here. Sometimes we all say things we don't mean, do things we regret. But family forgives, don't we?" She looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to play my part, to apologize, to make this easier for everyone. Daniel stood beside his mother, his face carefully blank. The man who'd hit me 60 seconds ago now looked like a concerned husband dealing with an unstable wife. He'd already rearranged his features, found his mask again. "Claire," he said softly, reaching for me. "Let's talk about this privately." His hand on my arm was gentle, public, performative. I felt the walls of my brownstone pressing in on me. All these people in my home, eating my food, drinking my champagne, and not one of them could meet my eyes. If you've ever sat in a room full of people and felt completely alone, you'll understand this silence. That specific kind of isolation that comes from being surrounded by witnesses who choose not to see. Thank you to those who help keep these stories alive. Your kindness helps give voice to people who've been forgotten, who sit alone in their pain, waiting to be seen again. I pulled my arm away from Daniel's touch. The room waited. I could feel their collective held breath, their discomfort, their desperate hope that I would smooth this over so they could go back to their cocktails and small talk and pretend they hadn't just watched a man hit his wife. "I think," I said quietly, "everyone should check their phones." Victoria's expression flickered just for a second, a crack in her perfect facade. "Claire, don't be dramatic," she said, but there was an edge to her voice now. Sharp, nervous. The first phone chimed, then another. Like dominoes falling, one notification after another rippling through the crowd. I watched their faces change as they read. Confusion, shock. The slow, creeping realization that something much bigger than a domestic dispute was unfolding in front of them. Daniel's face went white. "What did you do?" 18 months, I said again, my voice steady despite the way my hands were shaking. "That's how long I've known. About the asset transfers, the offshore accounts, the affair." I turned to Victoria. "The conditioning." "You're delusional," Victoria snapped, but her hand had tightened on Daniel's arm. Her knuckles were white. "The FBI received a very comprehensive package about 6 minutes ago," I continued. "Tax fraud, wire fraud, forgery, coercion." I smiled, tasting blood. "All documented, all verified." The room erupted into chaos, urgent phone calls, frantic whispers, the sound of expensive shoes backing toward the exit. But I stood perfectly still in the center of it all. Alone. Bleeding. And finally free. The doorbell rang. "That'll be the federal agents," I said quietly, right on time. 3 months earlier, I'd found the folder. Daniel had left his briefcase open on the kitchen counter, careless, distracted, probably texting Jessica while I made dinner like I did every Thursday night. Inside, tucked between client proposals and expense reports, was a manila envelope marked personal, confidential. I should have walked away, the old Claire would have. But something in my gut, some animal instinct I'd been ignoring for years, made me open it. Asset transfer agreement. Quitclaim deed, revocable trust amendment. My name was on every document, my signature forged on half of them. The brownstone, my grandmother's legacy, my savings, my home, was being transferred entirely into Daniel's name, effective the day after my 42nd birthday. I stood there holding those papers, my hands steady, my mind suddenly brutally clear. This wasn't betrayal. This was premeditation. I didn't confront him that night. Didn't scream or cry or demand explanations. Instead, I did something I'd never done in 12 years of marriage. I started looking. Bank statements Daniel thought were private. Login credentials he'd saved on his laptop. The stack of mail he always got to first. The phone calls he took in the next room. Within a week, I'd found Victoria's offshore account, in the Caymans, $2.3 million, moved in careful increments over 5 years. Money that should have gone to charity foundations, medical expenses, family trust distributions. Within 2 weeks, I'd tracked Daniel's gambling debts, online poker, sports betting, private games in Manhattan penthouses with men who didn't accept excuses. $180,000 owed to people whose names made my hands shake when I Googled them. Within a month, I understood. They weren't just taking my house. They were erasing me completely. The plan was elegant, I'll give them that. After the birthday party, after I'd signed what I thought were refinancing papers, Daniel would file for divorce. Claim I was unstable, cite my erratic behavior documented by Victoria's carefully curated witnesses. The prenup I'd unknowingly signed would leave me with nothing. No house, no savings, no claim to the life I'd built. And Jessica would move into my home before the ink dried on the divorce papers. I found the timeline on Daniel's computer, saved in a folder labeled 2024 restructuring. My erasure, planned with the same attention to detail he used to give his startup pitches. If you've ever found truth in the quiet moments after pain, you know what this part feels like. That cold clarity that comes when you finally stop making excuses for people who never deserve them. Thank you to everyone who supports these stories. Your kindness keeps hope alive for people still finding their voice after betrayal. I didn't tell anyone what I'd discovered. Not my friends, not my lawyer, not even Sarah. Instead, I started building my own file. Screenshots. Bank records. Recorded conversations. New York is a one-party consent state, and I consent to documenting every lie. I hired a forensic accountant who nearly wept at what I showed him. Retained a divorce attorney who specialized in fraud. And I set up a dead man's switch. An encrypted email that would send everything, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence to the FBI, the IRS, and the New York Times, if I didn't cancel it manually, every 24 hours. Then I waited. I played the devoted wife. Smiled at Victoria's subtle cruelties. Let Daniel think I was still pathetically, blindly loyal. Watched them set their trap with the patience of someone who'd already built a better one. 18 months of evidence. 18 months of documented lies. All leading to this moment. To that slap in front of 60 witnesses with their phones recording. To Victoria's whispered command that finally, perfectly, proved the conditioning she'd spent years denying. To the look on Daniel's face when he realized I'd been 10 steps ahead the entire time. Now, as federal agents walked into my ruined birthday party, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. There's a specific kind of quiet that settles over a brownstone at 2 a.m. Not peaceful. Not empty. Just waiting. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd served Daniel breakfast for 12 years, with my laptop open and 3 burner phones lined up like soldiers. Outside, Brooklyn slept. Inside, I was wide awake, building my case with the methodical precision of someone who'd finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. The diamond bracelet Victoria gave me sat on the table, catching the overhead light. Beautiful, expensive, bugged. I'd found the camera 2 days after she'd clasped it around my wrist, whispering about family heirlooms and legacy. A tiny lens embedded in the largest stone, transmitting to a receiver I'd traced back to Victoria's apartment on the Upper East Side. They'd been watching me. documenting my movements. Probably hoping to catch something they could use evidence of an affair, erratic behavior, anything to support their narrative of the unstable wife. Instead, I'd left the bracelet functional. Fed them loops of mundane footage, me working at my laptop, reading in bed, having coffee with Sarah. All carefully curated, all strategically boring. But tonight, the bracelet would capture something else entirely. There comes a point when silence stops meaning defeat, it becomes preparation. Over the past 3 months, I'd moved through my life like a ghost in my own home. Daniel barely noticed. He was too busy with Jessica, too consumed with whatever role his mother had programmed him to play. He didn't see me transferring my money into new accounts he didn't know existed. Didn't notice when I changed the passwords on every joint account. Didn't realize I'd hired 3 different attorneys, one for divorce, one for fraud, one specifically for asset protection. Each keystroke was a knife cutting through chains I'd worn so long I'd forgotten they weren't part of my skin. I'd documented everything. The recordings from the device I'd hidden in the living room bookshelf disguised as a vintage radio Victoria herself had complimented. Hours of Daniel and his mother discussing their plans in my own home, thinking I was at work or too naive to understand. "She'll sign anything you put in front of her," Victoria had said one Tuesday afternoon, her voice carrying the casual contempt of someone discussing livestock. Trusting women always do. I'd been in the bedroom, listening through my phone, my hand pressed against my mouth to keep from making a sound. The videos were worse. Daniel's mask slipping when he thought no one was watching. The way he'd shoved past me in the hallway. The night he'd grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave bruises, hissing about how I'd embarrassed him at a work function by talking too long to his boss. I'd filmed it all. My phone propped on the dresser, angled just right. Evidence documented with timestamps and metadata that even the best lawyers couldn't dispute. For years, I mistook generosity for love. Now, I'm learning the quiet math of self-respect. The forensic accountant I'd hired, a woman named Ruth who looked like someone's grandmother but had the investigative instincts of a bloodhound, had traced Victoria's money with frightening efficiency. "This is a RICO case waiting to happen," she'd said during our last meeting, her bifocals sliding down her nose as she showed me spreadsheets that made my head spin. Wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering through charitable foundations. "Your mother-in-law's been running a criminal enterprise disguised as philanthropy for at least a decade." Daniel's gambling debts were easier to track. He'd been sloppy, desperate. The loan shark he owed $180,000 to had been surprisingly cooperative when I'd approached him through a third party, offering information in exchange for documentation of the debt. Turns out criminals appreciate good record-keeping. My phone buzzed. Daniel, calling for the 4th time that hour. I let it go to voicemail. Took a sip of my coffee, cold now, but I didn't care. His voicemail was panicked. "Claire, please. We need to talk about this. Mother says you've been acting strange. Just call me back. Please." It's funny how silence can sound like thunder when guilt starts to echo. I'd stopped answering 3 days ago, stopped explaining, stopped defending myself against accusations I knew were coming, the setup for their birthday ambush. Let them wonder. Let them panic. Let them realize that the woman who'd spent 12 years accommodating their every whim had finally, irrevocably, stopped playing her assigned role. The email sat in my drafts folder waiting, addressed to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, the IRS, the New York Attorney General's office, every document attached, every recording transcribed, every transaction highlighted. All it needed was one click. But not yet. Tonight was the performance. The birthday party where they'd spring their trap, demand I sign away everything, probably manufacture some public breakdown to justify it all. I smiled, touching the diamond bracelet that would record every word. They taught me that love meant giving. Today, I'm teaching myself that love can also mean stopping. At 5:47 a.m., my lawyer's confirmation email arrived. Everything was ready: the asset protection order, the restraining order paperwork, the fraud complaint, the divorce petition that would make Daniel's prenup look like a child's crayon drawing. I stood, stretched, watched the first light break over the Brooklyn rooftops. For the first time in 12 years, I didn't need them to hear me. My silence had already spoken. Tonight, they'd finally understand what it said. The federal agents were professional, efficient, almost gentle as they moved through my ruined birthday party. But I didn't need them yet. First, I needed everyone to see. "Claire, stop this," Victoria hissed, her composure fracturing as Agent Rivera approached. You're hysterical. You need help." I wiped the blood from my lip with the back of my hand, tasted copper and something else, freedom maybe. Or just the metallic tang of a plan finally, perfectly executed. "You're right," I said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "I do need help." I pulled out my phone with steady hands. Opened the app connected to the projector we'd used earlier for the birthday photo slideshow. Daniel's tech setup, installed in our living room 6 months ago. State of the art, perfect for presentations. Perfect for evidence. "I need help understanding something," I continued, my voice carrying across the silent terrace. "So maybe all of you can help me figure this out." I pressed play. The screen mounted on the wall flickered to life. Our living room appeared, shot from the angle of the vintage radio on the bookshelf. Crystal clear audio, perfect framing. Victoria's voice filled the space, recorded 3 weeks ago. Once she signs the transfer documents at the party, the brownstone becomes Daniel's completely. She'll have no legal claim. On screen, Victoria sat on my sofa, in my house sipping tea like a queen plotting a coup. Daniel's voice responded. "What if she questions it? Claire's not stupid." "She's stupid enough to love you," Victoria replied, her tone dripping with contempt. "Stupid enough to think loyalty means something. Just make her feel guilty. Remind her how much she owes us. How we saved her from her pathetic little life." The room had gone absolutely silent, every eye fixed on that screen. "And if she resists?" Daniel asked. "Then you do what we discussed. Make her look unstable, emotional, get it on camera if you can. A public outburst. The judge will side with us in the divorce, no question." I watched Daniel's face drain of color as his own voice continued from the speakers. "The slap thing. You really think that'll work?" "It always has," Victoria said calmly. "I've conditioned you since childhood to respond to specific triggers. When I whisper the phrase, you'll act, you won't even remember choosing to do it. And with all these witnesses, all these cameras, we'll have documented proof that she provoked you. That she's dangerous. Unstable." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. "After tonight," Victoria continued, her voice cold with satisfaction. "She's out. The house is ours. The money is protected. And you and Jessica can finally move forward without this liability dragging you down." I stopped the video. The silence was absolute. Even the jazz had stopped playing. Someone must have killed the sound system. "You wanted witnesses?" I said quietly, meeting Victoria's horrified gaze. "Tonight, you have a room full of them." Daniel was shaking his head, backing away from his mother like she was toxic. You made me?" "Oh, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, despite the sting still burning on my face, I felt something like pity for him. "She's been making you do things your whole life." I have 17 more recordings documenting the conditioning, the trigger phrases, the behavioral modification sessions that started when you were 12 years old. I turned to address the crowd, all these powerful people who'd watched me get hit and said nothing. For anyone still unclear, what you witnessed tonight was the culmination of a decades-long psychological abuse program designed to control Daniel Harrington's access to his grandfather's trust fund. A trust that required a stable marriage of at least 5 years. I smiled without humor. We hit 5 years 3 months ago. Right around the time they decided I'd served my purpose. My phone buzzed. Ruth, my forensic accountant, right on schedule. I held it up so everyone could see the screen. "I'm also getting a notification that the evidence package I sent to the FBI, IRS, and New York Attorney General about 6 minutes ago has been received and flagged for immediate investigation." Victoria lunged for me, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. "You ungrateful little..." Agent Rivera caught her arm. "Mrs. Harrington, I'm going to need you to step back." "This is my home," she shrieked. "My family. You can't." "It's actually my home," I corrected quietly. "Purchased with my inheritance and savings. The forged transfer documents you plan to execute tonight? My lawyer has the originals. With your signatures. And Daniel's. Along with documentation of the $2. $3 million you've embezzled from charitable foundations over the past 5 years." The door opened. My attorney, Margaret Chen, 60 years old, 5 feet tall, and absolutely terrifying in court, walked in with 2 NYPD officers. "Mrs. Harrington," Margaret said calmly, "I have a restraining order preventing you from entering this property. Officers, please escort her out." Daniel! Victoria called desperately as they moved toward her. Daniel, do something! But Daniel had sunk into a chair, his head in his hands. The programming was breaking down in real time. I could see it, the fog lifting, the horror of realization setting in. I hit you, he whispered, looking at me with dawning awareness. She made me hit you. I know, I said, and I did. I'd spent 18 months documenting exactly how she'd done it. Victoria was screaming now as the officers guided her toward the door. Threats, promises of legal action. The desperate flailing of someone whose perfectly constructed empire was collapsing. I stood perfectly still in the center of my living room, and watched it all unfold with the cold clarity of someone who'd finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. Around me, phones were still recording, the evidence multiplying by the second, 60 witnesses to the truth. Margaret approached, touched my arm gently. Ambulance is here for your face. And I have the emergency asset protection order. Everything's frozen. They can't touch anything. I nodded, tasted blood again. Thank you, I whispered. Then, finally, I let myself cry. Not from pain, not from fear, from relief. After the verdict, silence became my favorite sound. It was the sound of justice finally breathing. The legal proceedings moved faster than I'd anticipated. Within 48 hours of my birthday party, Daniel was formally charged with assault witnessed by 60 people, recorded on at least 30 phones. Victoria faced federal indictments for wire fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement. The charitable foundations she'd pillaged for years began their own internal investigations. I watched it unfold from my lawyer's office in Midtown, the city sprawling below us like a circuit board of light and consequence. Margaret slid a folder across her desk. Emergency asset freeze went through. Every account, every property, every shell company, they can't touch a dime without court approval. The brownstone was mine again. Legally, irrevocably mine. Daniel's asking to see you, she added carefully. I looked up from the paperwork. No. She nodded, unsurprised. His lawyer says he wants to apologize. Claims he's in therapy, working through the conditioning. Good, I said, and I meant it. But that's his journey now, not mine. I didn't need to ruin them. Their lies had already done that. Within a week, the society pages that had once celebrated the Harrington family began running very different stories. Philanthropic dynasty faces federal fraud charges. Prominent Boston family's dark secrets exposed. The photographs showed Victoria being led from her Upper East Side apartment in handcuffs, her designer clothes, and perfect posture unable to disguise the collapse happening behind her eyes. The calls started almost immediately. Friends or people I'd thought were friends suddenly remembering my number. Claire, I always knew something was off. If there's anything I can do. I let most of them go to voicemail. Sarah was the only one I answered. She showed up at my door with Thai food and wine, her eyes red from crying. I should have said something that night, she whispered. I should have. You were scared, I said. They were powerful, I understand. But I also understood that some silences couldn't be easily forgiven. Even by me. The court proceedings dragged on for months. I attended only when legally required, watching from the back of the courtroom as Victoria's empire was dissected, transaction by transaction. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the bribes to city officials, each revelation more damning than the last. Daniel sat at the defense table looking smaller each time I saw him. The conditioning was breaking down, his lawyer argued. He was a victim too. The judge seemed sympathetic, but the assault charge remained. 3 months in jail, 2 years probation, mandatory therapy. He keeps asking about you, his lawyer told me in the courthouse hallway one afternoon. Wants to know if you'll consider reconciliation once he's completed treatment. I looked at this stranger in his expensive suit, still believing that love could be negotiated like a contract. Tell him I hope he heals, I said. But I won't be there when he does. Some debts don't need to be collected. Life has its own way of balancing the books. Jessica, Daniel's mistress, disappeared from the narrative almost immediately. I heard through the social circuit that she'd moved to California, changed her Instagram to private, was focusing on herself. The Tribeca apartment they'd picked out together was seized as part of the asset freeze. Another dream evaporated by someone else's greed. Victoria's trial became something of a media spectacle. The prosecution presented my evidence methodically, the recordings, the documents, the testimony from others she'd manipulated over the years. Former employees came forward. Business partners who'd suspected but stayed silent. Even family members who'd been pushed aside when they questioned her methods. The woman who'd once commanded every room she entered now sat motionless at the defense table, her silver hair no longer perfectly styled, her Chanel suits replaced by courtroom-appropriate conservative dresses that couldn't hide her diminishment. I attended the sentencing, not out of vengeance but as a witness to the completion of something that had started long before I entered this family. 15 years, federal prison, restitution to be determined. The judge's gavel came down with the finality of a period at the end of a very long, painful sentence. I walked out of the courthouse into afternoon light, that particular golden hour when Manhattan seems almost gentle. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the smell of roasting chestnuts from a cart on the corner. My phone buzzed. A text from Ruth, my forensic accountant. Restitution calculations complete. You'll be receiving compensation for all documented losses, plus damages. I pocketed the phone without responding. The money mattered less than I'd thought it would. That night, I stood in my brownstone finally, truly, mine alone, and opened the windows. Let the city sounds wash in. Sirens, laughter, the distant rumble of the subway, life continuing in its messy, complicated way. I'd spent 12 years making myself smaller to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. Another 18 months building the case that would free me. Now, for the first time in over a decade, I had no one to perform for. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility. I poured myself a glass of wine, good wine, the kind I'd stopped buying because Daniel preferred beer, and stood at the window watching Brooklyn shimmer in the dusk. They used to whisper that I'd lost my mind. Now they avoided their own reflections. And I was finally learning how to look at mine. After the noise fades, what's left isn't victory, it's understanding. 6 months after my birthday party, I stood in my brownstone kitchen making coffee at 5:30 in the morning. Same ritual, same dark roast. But this time, I was making it for myself, exactly the way I liked it, lighter than Daniel ever wanted, with cream and a touch of cinnamon. Small freedoms taste the sweetest. The restraining order meant Daniel couldn't come within 500 feet of the property. His belongings had been packed and moved to a storage facility in Queens. I'd hired professionals to do it, refusing to touch anything that had been his. The brownstone felt different now, lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled after holding their breath for 12 years. I'd returned to work the week after the trial ended. Walking into Caldwell and Pierce felt like stepping back into a life I'd set aside, but Margaret Chen had made a call to the senior partners on my behalf. Explained what I'd been through, what I'd survived. They offered me the executive editor position I'd turned down years ago. This time, I said yes. My colleagues treated me differently now, with a mixture of respect and careful distance, as if I were fragile glass. I wasn't. I'd been tested in ways they couldn't imagine, and I'd emerged stronger, sharper, more certain of my own worth. But I understood their discomfort. My story had been splashed across every news outlet in the city. I'd become a symbol of something wronged: wife, survivor, whistleblower. People projected their own pain onto me, saw their own betrayals reflected in mine. I tried to be gracious about it, but mostly I just wanted to move forward. Justice isn't about watching them fall, it's about standing again without hate. I used to believe I wanted Victoria destroyed, wanted to see her empire crumble, wanted Daniel to suffer the way I'd suffered. In those early months of investigation, my anger was a living thing, hot and sharp and hungry. But sitting in that courtroom, watching the sentencing, I'd felt something unexpected: emptiness where rage used to live. Their punishment didn't heal me, it just closed a chapter. The real healing came later, in therapy sessions where I unpacked 12 years of slowly dimming my own light, in conversations with Sarah where we rebuilt trust, brick by careful brick, in quiet evenings alone where I learned to enjoy my own company again. I used to believe love meant giving everything. Now I know love also means knowing when to stop. That was the lesson Victoria and Daniel had taught me, though not the one they'd intended. They'd shown me the price of loving people who saw kindness as weakness, who measured worth in dollars and compliance, who believed loyalty meant erasure of self. I'd paid that price willingly for over a decade. Never again. One evening in early spring, I found myself on the Brooklyn Heights promenade at sunset. The Manhattan skyline glowed amber and gold across the East River, and the air smelled like possibility, that particular urban blend of flowers struggling through concrete and the salt breath of the harbor. My phone rang, Daniel's mother's number. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Hello? Claire. Victoria's voice was smaller than I remembered. Tired. I'm calling from. I wanted to apologize? I finished for her. A long silence. Then, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did, what I took from both of you. Prison had apparently given her time for reflection. Victoria, I said quietly, watching the sun sink lower behind the buildings, I hope you find peace. I really do. But I can't be part of your healing process. That's your journey, not mine. I know. Her voice cracked. I just needed you to know that you were right. About everything. And I'm sorry. I hung up gently. Stood there watching the light fade, feeling something shift in my chest. Forgiveness isn't something you give because someone deserves it. It's something you give yourself when you're ready to stop carrying their weight. I wasn't quite ready yet. Maybe I never would be. But I was learning that peace didn't require forgiveness, just the decision to stop letting their story define mine. If my story teaches anything, it's this: kindness without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. I'd surrendered too much of myself, my time, my money, my dreams, my sense of worth, all offered freely to people who saw generosity as an invitation to take more. Now I was learning a different kind of strength, the strength to say no, to walk away, to choose myself without guilt or apology. The brownstones sold that summer for above asking price. Too many memories soaked into those walls. I bought a smaller place in Fort Greene, a sunny 2-bedroom, with exposed brick and windows that caught the morning light just right, a space that had never belonged to anyone but me. I filled it slowly. Furniture I chose, art that spoke to me, books that had been gathering dust because Daniel thought they made the place look cluttered. Each choice was an act of reclamation. Some nights I'd sit on my new balcony with a glass of wine and think about the woman I'd been at 30. So eager to prove she deserved love, so willing to twist herself into impossible shapes to earn approval from people who were never going to grant it. I wished I could tell her it would be okay, that the pain had purpose, that she was stronger than she knew. But maybe she needed to walk through that fire to become who I am now. Justice gave me back my name. But peace gave me back myself. And that, I was learning, was worth every painful step of the journey. If you've ever lost yourself trying to love someone who only saw your worth in numbers, I hope my story reminds you, it's never too late to choose yourself. Thank you for keeping these stories alive. Stories where justice doesn't shout, it heals.